Good morning. It is Thursday, the 28th of May. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your morning dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, all eyes on Spain, where the political system has been shaken to its core by a corruption investigation involving the former Prime Minister, José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero. Incumbent Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has ruled out early elections, though, and says he fully supports the former Premier, who's a close friend and mentor. We'll be live in Madrid. And the focus is also on Hungary. The country's new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar, is in Brussels today for one of the most important meetings of his political career. After talks with NATO, tomorrow he'll be sitting down with Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, to try to claw back billions in frozen EU funding. We'll be speaking exclusively to Brussels Rule of Law Chief Michael McGrath. Meanwhile, as NATO carries out military exercises on the Russia-Finland border, Poland's Donald Tusk is in London, building closer diplomatic ties with the UK. Prompted by the ongoing war in Ukraine, the two countries have signed a historic defence deal and a new master plan to counter irregular migration. But first, Israel has warned thousands of civilians to evacuate their homes in southern Lebanon ahead of a fresh wave of airstrikes. It comes as the US carries out new strikes inside Iran targeting a military facility. Meanwhile, this Thursday, the International Energy Agency is warning the world is facing the, quote, biggest energy security crisis in modern history as the shutdown in the Strait of Hormuz continues to rattle the global energy market. Our Europe editor, Maria Tadeo, sat down with the agency's executive director, Fátih Biroul, in an exclusive interview from Paris, where they discussed the outlook for Europe and, of course, the risks ahead.
I label this crisis as the largest energy crisis in the history. We had three energy crises up to now, two oil crises in 1970s, 1973 and 1979, and the 2022, after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in Europe we had a natural gas crisis. If I add how much oil and gas we lost in this all three crises, it is much less than what we lost in the Middle East crisis, Iran crisis now. It's a huge problem for the global energy system, global economy, for Europe and beyond. And
when you say this will trigger fundamental changes, especially you, and I want to reiterate this, you talk about energy, but also energy security. What kind of changes are you envisioning?
Because this shows us that the world is becoming more and more a dangerous place. And here the countries want to secure their energy supplies. And this would mean that the countries will review their energy strategies, which technologies, which fuels they are going to choose, and with which countries they are going to work, from which countries they import energy, for example, and they are going to review their energy strategies, and this will have major implications for the investment and beyond.
And some would argue no continent has paid such a high price over its strategic dependencies than Europe. But before we get into that, I also want to ask you, for European viewers, in mid-April, you made some comments which obviously made a lot of headlines, certainly in Europe, about jet fuel. You warned that in 6 weeks there could be no jet fuel. That created a lot of anxiety among finance ministers and also just Europeans who thought, this summer, am I going to be able to go on vacation? Am I going to be able to pay for fuel tickets? What is the situation now? Because from the outside, it seems that very stressed out scenario did not fully manifest. But is it the case?
Yeah. So the reason I said this is very simple. Europe imports about 75% of its jet fuel from Middle East normally, and it is not finished. And when we look at our stocks, jet fuel stocks, they are diminishing. And we said that if Europe cannot find new sources of imports, we are going to have major problems in terms of flying. Now, in the meantime, Europe was able to get some jet fuel from United States and from Nigeria to compensate this gap from Middle East. So, which means that we are now sort of okay when we are entering the traveling season, but we are going to pay much higher for flying here or there.
And of course, that takes us to the idea that this is not necessarily a supply crisis, but a price crisis. I do want to ask you...
Exactly. But also, let's don't forget that many companies, after I made this announcement, many companies, the Lufthansa, the Scandinavian, the Ryanair, and all of them, KLM, they cut their flights. And they cut their flights. And I do want,
just on this point, because I think this is very important, some, certainly in Brussels, believed that statements like that, they were contributing to fear-mongering. Yeah. Is that something that you would go, no, this was my duty and I had to say what I said and I stand by those comments?
Our motto is very clear, no fear, no favor. We look at the data, we say, give a wake-up call to the countries, and if we didn't give this wake-up call, they wouldn't rush to get from Nigeria and United States, and thanks to them, thanks to this our wake-up call, they were able to get some jet fuel from US and Nigeria, which barely now addresses the problem.
So in that sense, is the situation, the outlook now for Europe, looking relatively better compared to 2 months ago, or is this still uncertainty? Because we're seeing the Commission just got their forecasts for growth this year.
Yes, I wouldn't say better, but less worse than before.
And what does that mean this year? What are the scenarios that you paint?
Until, of course, we don't know what will happen with the state of Hurmuz. I very much hope that very soon we get a fully an unconditional opening of Strait of Hormuz. If it doesn't happen, the problem with the jet fuel and diesel and beyond will be with us for weeks to come.
And that was Fatih Biral there, the head of the International Energy Agency. And you can catch the full interview tonight with Maria Tadeo on Euronews. But now to Finland, where NATO is conducting military exercises close to the Russian border this Thursday, amid ongoing concerns in Baltic states about increased drone incursions. Our NATO correspondent, Shona Murray, is on the ground and is joining us live this morning from Finland, just 30 kilometres from the border with Russia. Good morning, Shona. Just tell us about these drills, and are they actually responding to the drone threat?
Yes, indeed. Good morning, Maeve. Well, certainly the exercises we've seen over the past couple of days, Northern Star, Sword 26, and we're in the middle of one of these exercises right now, which is why you'll see the tank behind me and you could see some simulation of live fire. But essentially what they're doing is trying to modernise NATO in response to what we're seeing in Ukraine, and it's essentially called NATO's Eastern Flank Deterrence Innovation. It includes things like traditional capabilities like the tank behind me, Chinook military helicopters, armed forces, but then of course, very important, advanced drone technology, reconnaissance drones, anti-personnel drones, because very much taking into account what's been happening here at the Finnish border and other Baltic states borders of the past few weeks, but also the past couple of years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. You've seen a lot of threats coming from Russian aggression. So what we also will see is basically a renewed cyber technology, autonomous zones, and effectively the drone wall we've all been talking about. But listen, take a listen to Major Matt Blueby from the US Army, who told me about this, what he calls a kill zone.
A big part of that is not just our own drones, but us, having sensors, a system of networked sensors, all integrated together through the same mission command systems, and us linking those together gives us that ability, and so it gives us the ability to have an autonomous kill web that we have. So whether you have, say, incursions in Estonia, but systems in Latvia or Lithuania that can see those, then someone else can use their technology to take those threats out.
So, Shona, the US is participating in this exercise. So does that mean they're fully committed to the NATO alliance?
Yeah, it's a very important question, Maeve, because the Americans have actually led the Sword 26 part of the exercise, which is very important. And as I said, deals with NATO's eastern flank, and it's also about innovation. So it is about the future. Having said all that, we know that the United States is withdrawing its capabilities from the future of NATO, essentially meaning that the US won't be supplying or won't make available capabilities to NATO in times of war or any sort of invasion. And that's very much a Trump administration decision. conversation, because as we know, the US has been a leading member of NATO for several decades and does very much take part enthusiastically in these exercises. But there is no doubt that it's not a philosophical conversation anymore. The US is pulling out of NATO, and basically the rest of NATO has to pull up its socks and basically try to fill that gap of those capabilities in the future. Maeve?
OK, Shona Murray, thank you so much for that live broadcast there from the Finnish-Russian border. And now these exercises and the recent expansion of NATO are all down to the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine illegally back in 2022 and shows no signs of backing down. For more on the high stakes of these security threats, our Ukraine correspondent Sasha Vakalina spoke to the former Prime Minister of the country, Arseniy Yatsenyuk.
Europeans have to realize that this war relates not only to Ukraine. They are going after every single European citizen, every single European country. So, and Ukraine actually today is on the front line of defending both Ukraine, because we are defending ourselves, and defending the European Union. The real understanding comes only in case if you feel it, if you see it, if you can listen to an air raid siren. We are living in a completely new world, and on the one hand, I wish every single European citizen to be in safety. On the other hand, I wish all of us to realize that you folks can be safe only in one case: if we as Ukrainians win this war, period.
You met Putin.
Correct.
What's your take as somebody who actually met Russia's president? Should there be the negotiating table, let's say, with the EU represented either by Kaja Kallas or Antonio Costa? That's another name that's been circulating in Brussels.
Let me go back to square one. First, please do not underestimate this war criminal. He's not an idiot. He's a KGB operative. He has changed definitely dramatically in the last decade, no doubt. But he still has quite effective top military and security brass. So he's less strategic, he's more tactical. And he always has the sense of whether you are weak or you are strong. So he makes a sniff test of each person he meets. But whether we have an ability and whether do we have a chance to outplay him? Yes, we do. No doubt.
And now we move on to Spain, where anti-corruption police have raided the headquarters of the ruling Socialist Party in Madrid. The heat is on current Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who's facing public criticism from a string of corruption scandals involving his close contacts. For more, we can cross now live to Madrid, where Euronews correspondent Rafael Salido is standing by for us outside the seat of the Socialist Party. Good morning. Just tell us about the raids that took place there yesterday.
Hi, good morning, Maeve. So yes, once again, here in Spain, yesterday we woke up to the news of yet another investigation involving the ruling party, the Spanish Socialist Party. Yesterday, federal agents came and entered the national headquarters of the party here in my back. They were executing a judge order, a request for documents in a case investigating alleged payments to a party operative called Lady Diaz. From the party, they insist that this was just a request of documents, not so much as a formal warrant. However, at the same time that the policemen were in the headquarters, the authorities were executing several search warrants in private homes of people supposedly involved in this investigation. The purpose of this investigation, which is still under gag order, is to find out whether Diaz was acting on her behalf or she was receiving instructions from the party or even the government.
So what is next, and how is the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez responding to all this?
Well, actually, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez was yesterday meeting with the Pope Leo XIV in the Vatican when he found out about the raid in the headquarters. After the meeting, he spoke to the press, where he insisted, first of all, that this was not a raid, but just a search warrant, a search for information. And even though he did strike a cautious tone, he did recognize the seriousness of the situation involving his party. However, he insisted that the PSOE has nothing to hide. He also insisted that he's not planning on calling elections or resigning at all, and he reiterated his support for former Prime Minister José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero, who is actually under a different investigation for influence peddling. But the Prime Minister said that so far he has seen no reason to change his support, and he defended his presumption of innocence. However, Prime Minister Sánchez pledged to fully cooperate with the investigation. Let's listen.
Apparently, we're talking about an administrative requirement, not a police search warrant. I don't want to downplay the seriousness of the investigation that the National Court is currently conducting, and I can tell the Spanish public that we're fully cooperating with the justice system.
Total colaboración con la justicia. Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez there on a story being, of course, very closely watched here in Brussels. And now for the view from the European Commission headquarters, the Parlement. Coming up, we'll be joined by Michael McGrath. That's Ireland's European Commissioner in charge of rule of law, democracy, justice and consumer protection. An Irish Fianna Fáil politician, Michael McGrath, was a senior government minister in the past, including the country's finance minister until 2024. So we're pleased to have you with us today in the studio. You're welcome.
Thank you, Maeve. Good to be here.
So as I said, we're following here in Brussels that story in Spain very carefully. Spanish people are shocked. As the Commissioner for Democracy and Rule of Law, what is your reaction to this kind of scandal?
Well, clearly we don't comment on individual cases, but the policy of the European Commission towards corruption is very clear. We have to have a zero tolerance policy across the European Union. What is most important is that the national authorities in any given case are allowed to do their work without any interference, that they follow the evidence and they take the case to its appropriate endpoint. We have recently reached agreement on a new anti-corruption directive in the European Union, so that will be transposed in the next couple of years, which harmonises the definition of corruption offences and also harmonises penalties. The reality is that corruption is insidious. It takes from valuable public resources and it fundamentally undermines public trust in institutions and in democracy itself.
Precisely.
So it's crucial that all member states tackle it, and we deal with it in the rule of law report.
And especially this issue, one of the investigations is actually about alleged attempts from the Socialist Party to sabotage or obstruct judicial investigations. So it's a very serious matter you're dealing with here that could impact indeed people's public trust in institutions.
Yeah, as I say, the case itself, I don't have the details, nor should I, and it will take its normal course. But every year we do an annual rule of law report, which will be published now in July of this year. It looks at every single country of the European Union across a number of headings, including under the heading of corruption, and examines the country's track record of investigating, prosecuting and securing convictions in respect of corruption cases, particularly high-level corruption cases, because of course the more senior the level, then the more serious the damage is done to public trust and indeed to the institutions themselves.
And let's talk about Hungary. The Viktor Orban era is over. Péter Magyar is in Brussels for talks. Will he get those billions of funds back, do you think?
So the Prime Minister will be meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, tomorrow. We have made a good start in resetting the relations with the Hungarian government. We are there as a Commission to work with them and support them on the path to restoring rule of law and commitment to respecting fundamental rights of all citizens in Hungary.
Sounds like they're not ready then. Are they ready then? Sounds like from what you're saying they're not ready.
Discussions are ongoing. I will be visiting Budapest next week and I'll be meeting with the new Hungarian Justice Minister again to agree on the reforms and look at the progress that they intend to make over the months ahead.
And why was there confusion?
We are there to work with them and support them.
Why was there so much confusion and mystery about the meeting between Ursula von der Leyen and Péter Magyar?
I'm not sure there was mystery or confusion, but these things often are only nailed down quite late on. That's the reality.
Will they have dinner?
Given schedules and timetables. I don't know the detail of their engagement, but the important thing is that they will meet and they will continue the substantive discussions on the issue at hand, and that is about how the European Commission can support the new Hungarian government in their efforts to restore rule of law in Hungary and ensure that the necessary reforms can be implemented. So we will support them, and so far they have demonstrated a very clear and steadfast commitment on this path, which will help to serve the best interests of the Hungarian citizens at the end of the day.
And just back on your file when it comes to tech, etc., you'll be coming out soon with a proposal to wean off our dependency on big US tech, promote our own homegrown cloud technology, etc. Can you confirm this plan?
So this will be led by my colleague, the Executive Vice President, Henry Verkunnen. It is a tech sovereignty package, and it is consistent with the overall policy direction that the European Union is currently taking. It needs to be seen alongside all of the other measures that we have brought forward so far in this Commission in the last 18 months, designed to improve our competitiveness. Yes, have a focus on strategic autonomy, but at a time when there is so much upheaval, geopolitical uncertainty and indeed economic volatility, we do need to make sure that on key strategic issues that the European Union is supporting its indigenous industries and that we have access to the critical services and indeed materials that we need.
Okay. Commissioner Michael McGrath, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Europe Today. And thank you so much for tuning in. For more news and analysis, you can visit euronews.com or check out our social medias. And we'll be back again tomorrow, so tune in for that. Thanks for watching. Take care.